Good Friday morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for rejoining Mike and George on Right Spokane Perspective. George, you know, all during this week, we have been featuring some barn burner, some whopper of shows, and we're going to close this work week out with another whopper on a major societal issue. This is one that is global. We're talking about domestic violence today. And I'll tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, you know, as one of your 7 city council members in the city of Spokane, I can tell you that domestic violence is an issue that is near and dear to my heart.
It is alive and it is not well.
Yep, absolutely, George. And I'll tell you something else, ladies and gentlemen. You know, all through last year, being in the position that I am, I do get a weekly reporting from the Spokane Police Department with regard to the calls that they receive on a weekly and a monthly basis. And I'm telling you what, man, without a doubt, domestic violence is the number one call that our Spokane Police Department do get calls on. I'm talking about in excess of 100 calls per week. And right underneath that is a category called argument, which, again, could comprise, all kinds of different types of arguments. But I'm sure that one would think that some of the issues that were borderline domestic violence are actually classified as arguments. There's a wonderful organization that just got in contact with me with regard to a program that they're getting ready to kick off this coming Monday, the 14th. And I'm telling you what, George, we got to get this information out. We got to air this issue. And I'm glad that we've got a couple of ladies here with us today that are going to help us do that.
Absolutely, Mike. Not only that, folks, but listen to this. We are talking with 2 ladies who are very actively involved with the idea of domestic violence. One is a 14-year survivor of domestic violence. So you're going to hear from both of these, but keep in mind, this organization gets no government funding. It is strictly supported by itself and by the helping hands of our neighbors and friends, people who donate. And as Mike said, with the new thrift store opening out on Highway 2 west of town, it will be an area where perhaps some proceeds can go back in to help strengthen and help broaden the effects of this organization. So with that, I'm going to introduce to you our 2 ladies here. The first one, the director, so she carries the biggest whip there, is Dr. Mabel Dunbar. She is the director of the Women Healing and Empowerment Network is the name of the organization. Women Healing and Empowerment Network. It's an interdenominational religious network, folks. So it is a Christian network, but you do not have to be a member of any formal church. So with that, Dr. Mabel, how about a little bit of background on who Dr. Mabel is and how she got involved with this stuff?
Well, first of all, I want you to let you know I don't carry a whip. That would be abusive. So we're talking about domestic violence. But I got involved with this ministry many, many years ago. In fact, I am a victim. My mom, when she was 18 years old, she was raped by a church leader. And 9 months later, of course, I was born. And growing up in the church, I got a lot of messages about myself, about my limitations because of my birth, unique birth, that I would not be good enough, that I wouldn't amount to anything. But I had a wonderful mother who
she knew better.
She just believed, and she believed in me as her child, and she just believed in the potential that God has given everyone. And through the years, I grew up and I had my issues, still have my issues, I'm sure. But I realized that I was not the only one. I'm not an isolated case. And God just impressed me that with the skills that He has given me, that I should reach out to other people.
It's interesting to me because, as you say, people trying to downgrade you and your abilities and your potential. But I find that very rarely is there anything truly unique in this world. And I've been around here a lot longer than you have, Dr. Mabel. I have seen a lot more different things. But there is so much that is just repetitious, maybe not immediate, but here and somewhere else and then somewhere else and somewhere else. And I firmly believe that your mother's attitude, your attitude, is the best attitude. I'm me. I have unique gifts. I probably am not the greatest person in the world, but I have certain unique gifts given to me by God.
Amen.
And as long as I develop these, and I really do have one credo, you have no right to hurt another person.
Amen.
That I believe wholeheartedly. But other than that, I've got a right to do anything I want, being a curmudgeon and cussing and moaning. And, that's all part of it. So anyway, how did the organization come about?
Well, when I was, I attended a university in Michigan, and while there was a Christian organization, and while there, I started helping a lot of Christian women. When I had finished my master's, I became the executive director of a local county shelter. And while there, I was just embarrassed and shocked at the amount of Christians that were coming in and into the shelter. And the women actually believed that they should stay in abusive relationships because God wanted them to. And when I realized how many of these individuals were being told that that is what God wanted, and there were biblical texts that were misinterpreted and read to them to condone them staying in that situation, God just impressed upon me that I should really open up a facility to address these issues.
Somebody should tell them the truth.
Exactly. And, through the process of time, God intervened, and we were able to secure property that was donated to us to begin this ministry. So it started in Michigan, and my husband being a minister, we got a call to relocate to Spokane. And while here, I was asked to start a ministry. And, people impressed upon me that it was a big issue here in Spokane, like Mike said. And I am just shocked at the statistics, and it was bad, but over 100 calls a week.
You bet. And I'll tell you something,
staggering
Doctor.
Stuff.
That is just the city of Spokane now.
Yes.
I mean, that doesn't include what's going on in the county,
the sheriff's department.
or the other 11 municipalities we have in the county. That's just the city.
I had no idea it was this bad. But anyway, it just shows the need that we have to have a lot of programs. But I think, I really believe that God wants us as Christians to rise up and to let everybody know that it is not his desire for anyone to be abused.
Regardless of what your grandmother told you, what your mother told you, what your pastor told you, it is not in the Bible that you are to take abuse. That turn the other cheek is great, but then smack the snot out of whoever hit you.
There you go. And I'll tell you something else, folks. Before we get any further, we got to get some contact information out, because I'm telling you what, like I said at the beginning of the show, this is a very timely show. We're going to get this information out to you. Please, we know that we've trained you well. You got your pen and papers handy. www.whenetwork.com. Again, whenetwork.com. Telephone number 509-323-2123. Again, 323-2123. We're talking about a 10 o'clock ribbon cutting opening, if you will, of a new thrift store that is going to be supporting this ministry that is looking into this major issue that we've got, again, globally, called domestic violence. The event basically occurs at 10 o'clock in the morning, January 14th, this coming Monday, folks. And I'm telling you what, as I've already said, this is the number one call that the City of Spokane Police Department gets on a weekly basis. It is extremely disturbing to me. Yes, by virtue of the fact that the city does have some social service money that they do set aside every year, in my opinion, there is just not enough money going into programs like this.
And Mike, what is the address of the new
You got
thrift
it,
store?
George. That address will be 13514 West Sunset Highway. Again, 13514 West Sunset Highway. Now, George, we've already had an opportunity there to get the doctor to kind of chime on in. We do have an associate with the doctor by the name of Taffy Hunter. And folks, I'm telling you what, Taffy is a 14-year survivor. She was one that basically got smart enough and gained the courage to get out of an extremely abusive relationship. My hat's off to you, Taffy. Please.
Thank you.
Give us, give the listeners an idea. Who is Taffy? Taffy. Where are you been? Where are you headed?
Well, like you said, I was in a 14-year marriage to a military person. And back in February 2010, God released me from that marriage and told me to fly, told me to get out. And so I packed our van. We lived in New Mexico at the time. I packed our van with 7 days worth of clothes. I have 3 young children, and we drove away and came here to Washington State. This is where my family lives. During the time of recovery, because there's so much recovery that takes place after you get out, it was interesting to me as I started to learn about domestic violence and what I had been through and the things that I was going to have to do to recover from that. A statistic that really stood out to me is it takes the average woman 7 attempts of getting out of these relationships before she's actually able to stay out. They're so insidious and they just take over your life. 7 attempts. I was able to get out at 3, so I'm glad that I broke that statistic. It took probably a good year to 2 years for me and my children to come to a place of health that we were able to recover. During that time, I read Dr. Dunbar's book for domestic violence survivors and have a very strong relationship with Christ. And at that time, he told me, you have a ministry here. And I'm going to cry because it's so emotional still. You have a ministry to women in the church, because I sat in the couch listening to my pastors say, be the submissive wife, stick with it, just submit to him, love him more, he's under stress, etc., etc. And that's not what I needed to hear.
Oh, you needed to hear, take a baseball bat and get his attention. No, that's my
Now, George, violence begets violence.
Not necessarily the correct psychological way to answer a problem like that.
Well, I'll tell you something, Taffy, and as well, Dr. Dunbar, us males, we cannot even imagine for the life of ourselves, why a woman would stay in an abusive relationship. I mean, one word that does come to mind would be codependency. Again, I'm not even going to go anywhere to even acknowledge that I understand what's happening here. But I tell you what, we're going to dive into that subject after we get back from the break. And as well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, www.whenetwork.com. You can give these folks a call at 323-2123. You can attend that grand opening of this thrift store. Again, that is going to be supporting a ministry, is going to be supporting an effort with regard to outreach, education, treatment, and whatnot that is associated with domestic violence. So with that, we are going to be back in just a couple of minutes. Hang in there, folks. And welcome back from the break, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for rejoining Mike and George on your end of the work week, Friday edition of Right Spokane Perspective.
And we have something for you to ponder over the weekend, folks.
Oh, absolutely. But before we head off into that direction there, George, just a quickie announcement here. Spokane College Women's Association, as part of the Distinguished Speaker Series of the 2012-2013 series, on January 23rd, you are going to hear from keynote speaker, none other than Captain Scotty Smiley. Again, Mike and George did feature Captain Scotty Smiley on the Right Spokane Perspective just a couple of days ago. Remember, this guy is a mover and a shaker.
Yes,
he is the only, in history, folks, 100% blind active duty military officer that has served our United States, and for good reason.
And blinded in action in Iraq.
You bet. This guy is an author of a book called Hope Unseen. It's a story behind, him being the Army's first blind active duty officer. It is a story of hope. It's a story of faith. What more can I say, folks?
Family love.
You bet. Family love. We're talking about $20 per plate. This is a luncheon. If you're going to RSVP here, please call 368-0695. Again, 368-0695. Now, for those of you folks that ended up joining us a little bit late in today's broadcast, we are in the studio today with a couple of ladies here from the Women's Healing and Empowerment Network. We're talking about the city of Spokane's #1 police call in domestic violence. Now, right prior to the break, folks, I happen to make some commentary there with regard to, us men, knowing that domestic violence is not just a gender-focused type crime time, if you will, because it does happen between women and men and women, as well as adults and children for the most part, adults and seniors, children and seniors. I mean, domestic violence is such a broad issue. But again, I'm sure that you can well imagine that this faith-based organization known as Women's Healing and Empowerment Network, although they do provide services to men, the vast majority of those services are pretty much directed to the women. If you'd like to log on and check these folks out, like George and I always encourage you to do, please do so by going to www.whenetwork.com. You can give these folks a call at 323-2123. Please, by all means, visit them as they are going to be going through a ribbon-cutting ceremony this Monday, January 14th at 13514 West Sunset Highway. What you're going to be looking for is a thrift store business that's going to be open that is going to be called Cleone's Closet. Very interesting name. So with that, we're going to be dragging, if you will, Taffy Hunter back into the conversation. So welcome back, Taffy.
Thank you.
First thing I think that the listeners probably should get a little bit of information on is, what is domestic violence?
Domestic violence is so much more than the physical violence that we all think about. The physical violence is usually the end of the cycle of domestic violence. Before somebody feels comfortable enough to hit you or beat you up, first they have to get you to the point where you're going to accept that. And so you start out with verbal abuse, name calling, put downs, emotional abuse. You can't do anything right. It's all your fault. Financial abuse to keep you bound in the relationship. I know in my case, I was given a $5 a week allowance to do with what I wanted.
Generosity.
Isn't it though? Bound to credit cards, having to beg for parking change, those sorts of things. There's a lot of stuff that goes into domestic violence that's so much more than just the physical. And often you'll hear women who've been in these relationships, and I said this myself, just hit me already, because then I have a reason to leave. Just hit me already. The stuff leading up to the physical abuse is so much worse than the actual physical abuse. The fear, the intimidation, the mental stress, constantly living in a fight or flight.
4 hours a day.
Absolutely. Those eggshells, they crack under your feet constantly.
No doubt about it. And I'll tell you something else, ladies and gentlemen, in case you haven't figured it out, we're talking about not only physical violence comprising domestic violence, domestic abuse, we're talking about sexual abuse, sexual violence, psychological abuse. I'm telling you what, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this is the city of Spokane's #1 call that our police make on a weekly basis. We got to be doing better by our citizens here by, devoting more time, more energy, more effort, more funding to this particular issue here.
And folks, as Taffy mentioned earlier, across the nation, the average is a woman, because again, the majority of the time it is women who are being mistreated in these abusive relationships. But the majority of the time it is 7 attempts before the woman has worked up enough, whether it's despair of ever getting whoever the other half is straightened out so that she isn't abused, or whether it's getting enough belief in God or herself that, yes, I can do it. I'm going to get out of this thing. And you'd mentioned, Taffy, you had 3. Your third attempt was the one that got you out of this particular relationship. And we were talking a little bit before break. Look at all, folks, this is for you. Those of you who are in a good, secure situation, just try to imagine what Taffy had to think about, because she had a couple of small children, and she had been married for 14 years and had been abused for pretty much all of these 14 years. What would she have to think about to get out of this marriage? Because, hey, no job. Where am I going to live? How am I going to live? What am I going to do for food? Can I buy clothes for my kids? Can I send them to school? Do I have a vehicle? And all of these are aspects of it that a lot of us don't really understand, nor do we take into consideration.
Oh, you bet. And let's not forget also, George, that, one of the comments that Taffy ended up making is she now had an opportunity to spread her wings and fly and do good by herself.
Exactly.
Exactly. And that's another aspect of the psychological abuse. Women, some of the abusive men, and like I said, it's not just,
it's
men
not
only.
Women.
Women, there are instances where women are abusing men too, but the vast majority, I would say, are women being abused, and they're being held under the thumb of the abuser.
Absolutely.
I mean, $5 a week allowance. Come on, begging for parking change. I mean,
your
a marriage
kids wouldn't accept a $5 a week allowance.
You bet. And one of the neat things about this thrift store, as I understand it, and we're going to cover this even more in detail, is not only are we raising money for the cause, but we're also providing women with an opportunity to gain some job experience. Okay,
confidence.
That's right, confidence. Putting their mind outside of that abusive situation that they were locked into for however long that they were locked into.
Let them see that there's
There
another
you
part
go.
of the world.
There you
Yep.
go. You
And
betcha.
Doctor, how about giving us a little bit of insight into what the women do go through when they are experiencing their first separation, and then as time goes on and they do become more and more self-reliant?
Well, one of the things in working with women, I've been dealing with this in this area for about 25 years now.
You started as a child.
I started out as a child.
Yes, you did. Yes.
But now, hopefully, I'm a middle-aged, mature woman. But one of the things, and I think the greatest hurdle that women who have been in these situations have had to go through when they come to us is to trust. They are angry, they're hurt, they cannot believe that people out there really care.
Not only that, but how did God let this happen to me?
Absolutely. And so it takes us a while for them to trust us. Some of them are angry, they curse us, they tell us different things. But eventually we're able, they're able to get that trust and they feel comfortable. And in our program, we don't just provide shelter. Our ministry is Women's Healing and Empowerment Network. And the key component of our organization is the healing and the empowerment. And so we help the women to find healing, to get recovered, so that they would not continue to choose partners who will keep that intergenerational cycle of abuse going. And so that's the important thing for us to do. And then as the women are being healed, we empower them. We try to help them to find out that God has given them potential. He's given them power. And so we try to create an environment where they are empowered to make decisions, to make choices that are the best for themselves and their children. And interestingly enough, there are some women who actually will go back to their abuser, because sometimes that abuser will even reach out to us. So I want our audience to understand that our first goal is not to destroy relationships, but it is simply to empower the victim so that she can make positive choices for
Get
herself.
out of that victim mentality.
Exactly, and not repeat it, because I've had a woman who, 5, 6, 7 times she ended up in an abusive relationship, and there's a reason why.
Yes.
And we have to help women understand why they keep on going back to these kinds of individuals. And the amazing thing and the most powerful thing I've experienced is when we have these women in group or in counseling sessions, and you actually see a light bulb goes on in their head where they say, "That's why I've stayed in this relationship. That's what's happened to me. That's why I couldn't get out." And that is the most awesome moment in our
that
ministry.
gives them the ability to say, now I know how to handle
Absolutely.
it. And either rectify the situation, because like you mentioned, not all of them leave the person that was abusing them. There are times, and I imagine you've seen some successful reuniting of those people.
Absolutely.
Oh,
So,
you bet.
once they understand what is causing it and what they're not going to let happen in the future, it can turn out to be a very positive thing for them.
And this might sound strange to our audience, but there was a time when I was so angry with men because of the abuse. But I remember one time when I had to do a men's group, believe it or not, of criminals who were court mandated. And I had to do a group of about 12 men. And my sympathy changed when one of those men stood up and he just looked at me and he said, "Mabel, where were you 20 years ago when my father was beating my mother?" He said, "I didn't know any better." He said, "So when I
That's what I
started
grew
beating
up
my
with."
wife and they arrested me," he said he didn't understand. So I just want our audience to know that my philosophy is this. Domestic violence, abuse issues, they are sin issues. And we need to stop blaming. Men are abusive, but women are abusive too. But what we need to do is come to the table and say, okay, we have issues. We're abusive. We need to find a way that we can work together, because it's the enemy's attempt to have the man blaming the woman blaming the man, the
division.
children blaming the parents. And we're so divided that we cannot come together as a united group to destroy the enemy's attempt that he wants to destroy our families. So that's what we are about. We are about our network is about bringing people together, helping individuals to recognize the sin issue, and networking together to end it in our homes and in our churches and in our community.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Mike, where can people who maybe are in a situation where they could use some assistance, or if they know someone who's in a situation where they could use some assistance, where could they contact this Women's Health, Healing, and
empowerment.
Empowerment Network.
You bet, George. That'll be www.whenetwork.com. Again, whenetwork.com. Give these folks a call at 323-2123. Again, 323-2123. Don't forget, folks, this is one of those deals where you got to be there or be square, because we're talking about 10 o'clock at 13514 West Sunset Highway. They are going to be doing a ribbon cutting this coming Monday, the 14th, at a new thrift store called Cleone's Closet. Now, please give these folks a call, because not only are they there to provide assistance, provide counseling, et cetera, and so forth, provide women an opportunity to gain some experience, gain some confidence, but they're also in need of your financial and material support, folks. You can definitely bear in mind to donate some new or gently used clothing, as well as household items. And these are the items that this thrift store is going to be selling in order to financially support some of the activities, some of the ongoings of the Women's Healing and Empowerment Network. So with that, folks.
Thank you, Taffy. Thank you, Dr. Dunbar. And folks, thank you for listening.
You bet. So with that, we are out of here. This end of the work week Friday edition of Right Spokane Perspective. Don't forget, folks, grab that family, give them a great big hug.